Minions have always been a fantastic starter build for Necromancer. It's very easy to level, it's quick to play, it's fun to play, and it transitions extremely well into the mid and early late game. This is a build that can kill Duriel, it's a build that's probably going to be able to do Nightmare 100 this season, but it's also going to probably be our fastest 1 to 50 build. The most significant buff was the buff to the Blood Golem, because his attacks now cleave. If you don't know, Blood Golem has a rune that makes him do 50% bonus damage while healthy, and having cleaving auto attacks with a 50% damage buff is absolutely crazy. Let's just dive straight into the skill tree and start talking about what makes this build so good. So for our basic skill, we're going to be taking Reap with Acolyte's Reap. There's an argument for taking the new Decompose with this rune, the Acolyte's Decompose, because it'll apply Vulnerable, which is great for single target, but it's totally unnecessary in the 1 to 50. You much prefer just the raw corpse generation from Reap. For our core skill, so we're going to be putting 1 point into Sever, and we're going to be taking Enhanced Sever, and then we're going to be taking Supernatural Sever. So Sever is technically better until level 25 or so, because it's going to do a ton of damage. The buffs to it are very significant, so its damage is actually higher than Bone Spear now at lower levels. But later on, you will want to unspec your 3 points here and put them into Hued Flesh. But especially 1 to 25, you want this Sever. It's very important. In our core skills, we're going to be putting 3 points into Skeletal Warrior Mastery for the 45% health and damage, 1 point into Spiked Armor. The reason for this is actually so that the Thorns can proc Lucky Hit, which will proc a variety of different effects, but it's not really for the Thorns damage itself as much as it is for the Lucky Hit procs on your minions. We're going to be putting 1 point into Grim Harvest. This will make it so that whenever we summon new minions, or whenever we summon a Skeletal Priest, it's actually going to give us Essence, which is pretty nice. But really what we're after is the Fueled by Death for the 9% damage multiplier. We're going to be putting 3 points into Death's Embrace, which works very well for us for damage reduction, as well as our Skeletal Warriors and Golem for their damage increase, as well as their damage reduction. And then for our mages, we're going to be taking Death's Reach. The 12% is pretty nice for the mages, you know, you're not really going to complain about that. We're going to be putting 3 points into Skeletal Mage Mastery, which will buff our mages by 60%. And then this is like one of the big new weird things that we're doing, which is we're taking Iron Maiden with Enhanced Iron Maiden, and then we're taking Horrid Iron Maiden. So at first this might seem kind of odd, you know, we're used to seeing the Decrepify. So the reason we're doing Iron Maiden is A, it's getting buffed, so actually the damage on this is becoming fairly decent. Like, this is going from 20 to 30%, so it's a 50% damage increase, and then Horrid Iron Maiden is going from 20 to 30%. So, you know, that's another significant damage increase. And Iron Maiden generates a ton of essence on cast, an absolute ton because of Enhanced Iron Maiden. This allows us to just spam Sever using Iron Maiden as our generator. So Iron Maiden is going to fill our essence bar almost anytime we use it, and it's going to do a significant amount of damage. So not much to complain about there. Plus, it's going to proc our Amplify damage. So in the 1 to 50 bracket, all of this combined makes Iron Maiden better than Decrepify. Moving on, we're actually going to put 2 points into Corpse Tendrils, and we're going to go all the way to Plagued Corpse Tendrils. This is going to allow us to make enemies vulnerable, which is going to give us a big damage increase, and obviously Corpse Tendrils is just insane in general. Necrotic Carapace is going to give us fortified generations whenever our minions spawn corpses, which is going to happen all the time. So this is just going to keep us fortified capped. We're going to put 3 points into Reaper's Pursuit for 15% movement speed every single time we use our Reap. 3 points into Golem Mastery for the 75% Golem buff. I actually think this season there's going to be so much more emphasis on the Golem than there was in previous seasons, especially when you get into the Paragon board and stuff. But Golem Mastery, it's super important. You want this maxed out as fast as possible after you hit 25 and unlock your Golem. This is so important. We're also going to be putting 3 points into Inspiring Leader for the 12% attack speed buff, 3 points into Hellbane Commander for 30% damage, 3 points into Bonded in Essence for the heal. So the heal is really important. So the heal also, so the priest, when you activate your Skeletal Priest, right, it's going to heal your minions for 40% over 8 seconds. Used to be 25, by the way. Now it's 40, which is a ton. And this is going to become even more important when we look at our mages and our golem runes. But this is actually Bonded in Essence. You actually want to get this fairly early. And by the way, I have a leveling order linked in the description below. I have a build with the leveling order, so if you want to see exactly what order to take your skills. But Bonded in Essence, we actually take a lot earlier than you would expect because it enables certain pieces of the build that we'll get to in a minute. We're also going to be putting 3 points into Death's Defense for the 12% increased armor and 24% resistance for our minions. We need them to stay healthy and strong. So, Army of the Dead. So we are going to be, there's four different aspects that we're going to grab on our way from 1 to 50 through the Codex of Power. And one of them is the aspect of Unyielding Commander, which basically, whenever your Army of the Dead is active, your minions get 100% attack speed buff. The reason we're grabbing this is because of a rune change on the Paragon board that we'll talk about later. But attack speed on minions is now very important. So, like I said, we'll talk about it more later. But Army of the Dead, generally really good. Obviously, pairs really well with the Legendary. Then we're taking Kalen's Edict. And again, Kalen's Edict used to be super terrible, but with this new Legendary node, pretty decent now. Before we talk about that, though, let's first talk about our skeletons. So, we're going to be taking Reapers, with the Reapers carving off a corpse. Again, you know, if you've played minions before, you're familiar with this, but Reapers have AoE damage, they have very good damage, and they're very tanky. They're just better than Skirmishers and Defenders. They also proc Lucky Hit. They're just better in literally every measurable way. For our mages, we're going to be running Bone Mages with the bonus 40% damage after being alive for 5 seconds. So, Bone Mages, 40% damage buff. They already are the hardest hitting minions, and the downside, though, is they consume 10% of their life every time they cast. However, with them healing for 40% over 8 seconds, so 5% per second, and then every 8 seconds they heal for 60%, I think it is. Yeah, 60% every 8 seconds. It is very easy for them to sustain their health. They'll be full health like all the time, and they're just going to be chunking everything. So this buff plays a really big role in us being able to play Bone Mages because we no longer have to worry about them dying. Before, they would slowly bleed out over time. This is no longer the case. For our Golem, and this is the key piece, right? We're going to be running the Blood Golem specifically for the 25% damage reduction to him, and it's 50% increased damage while he's healthy. And again, with all the healing, with all the tankiness, with everything that we're giving him, it is trivial to stay healthy. He will be full health all the time. And even if he's not, his active heals him, so it's not a problem. And what's so amazing is, like, it's 50% of 182% weapon damage, right? Which is already a lot. But then in single target, it gets tripled. You can see in a lot of the gameplay footage pre-buff, like before all these buffs are coming and all these changes are happening, my Golem's already one-shotting elites on active. That is crazy. And so this dude is an absolute beast. You can see, like, I'm absolutely shredding bosses, I'm shredding everything, and it's just going to get better when his attacks start cleaving. Before we talk about what makes this build so insane in the mid and late game this season, we first need to talk about two important topics. The first is your weapon choice. If you've watched minion builds before, especially on this channel, I bring this up every single time, and the reason is because it's so freaking important. Minions' attack damage scales with your weapon's attack damage, but their attack speed does not scale with your weapon's attack speed. This means the slower and harder hitting your weapon is, the better it is, and it's not even close. I mean, a two-handed scythe is literally 40% better than a one-handed weapon. It's not even close. You can use a two-handed sword over the scythe, but the scythe is going to be about 10% better than a two-handed sword. Now, the next topic is about legendary aspects. This build is meant to get you to World Tier 3 as fast as possible, so I picked out a couple of aspects that are really strong that you can farm out before you take on the World Tier 3 boss. The first is the aspect of reanimation, which you go on your two-handed weapon, which is effectively just going to give your minions 60% damage. The second is the aspect of Unyielding Commander. This is going to give your minions a massive damage increase and damage reduction during your Army of the Dead. Now, this aspect becomes much better later, but it's still really useful for killing bosses and getting through difficult content, because it gives you about 6 seconds of insane damage and survivability. On your pants or chest or whatever, we're going to grab the aspect of Might, which is going to give us 20% damage reduction. And then finally, we're going to get the aspect of the Protector, which is going to give us a barrier whenever we engage with an elite. This is particularly useful when fighting bosses because it gives us a barrier when we engage the boss. So all of these combined makes the build crush into World Tier 3. It'll make World Tier 2 very easy, and World Tier 3 will be, accessible very early. All right, let's talk a bit about the mid game, just so you guys kind of know where this build is headed. So the biggest change in the mid game, aside from all the Golem buffs, is the change to Cult Leader. So if you don't know, minions currently way over cap attack speed. I mean, you could easily get your minions to 200% plus attack speed, like without really even trying. But their actual attack speed is capped at 100%. Their functional attack speed is capped at 100%. So to help fix this, Cult Leader has been reworked so that for every 20% attack speed your minions get, they also get 10% damage. So even if you go over the 100% cap, you're still getting 10% damage per 20% attack speed. Now, this is the key point, and I think a lot of people are missing this. Cult Leader currently is actually multiplicative with itself. So what this means is if you have all 3 effects active, it's not a 45% damage increase. It's actually about a 52% damage increase because it's 1.15 times 1.15 times 1.15, right? It's not plus. And I don't know why it would work any other way. I fully expect the new glyph to also be multiplicative, which means, you know, you can very easily get to 100% attack speed. This isn't even hard. It'll be 1.1 times 1.1 times 1.1 times 1.1 times 1.1. And this ends up being like 1.7 or something. And so this is actually going to be massive, massive damage increase for minions. On top of the Cult Leader changes, we're also getting another substantial buff where the bonus HP on the Golem glyph is actually being changed to bonus damage. And again, this is going to be a damage multiplier, 25%. That is a ton of extra damage. And you can see you've got all these different things, right? Your minions are now scaling ridiculously hard with Cult Leader. Attack speed is giving bonus damage. The Golem board is full of attack speed, by the way. So the Golem is going to be hitting like an absolute freight train. And the Golem glyph is now a damage multiplier. All these things together, this build is going to crush in the late game. And this build I laid out will crush from 1 to 50. And, you know, stay tuned because I'm going to be playing this build. I'm going to be perfecting it. And after my first day, I'm going to be like level 80 or 90. And I'm going to post everything I figured out with minions. And I'm going to have a guide for the construct and everything in that video. So thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.